Hey guys, Tarke here, back from my morning walk. Yes, back from my morning walk at 4:30. We like to go ham sandwich. And today I'm going to be covering the Pierce changes which happened in the last beta wipe. Now, I know that people have known about the Pierce changes for a while, but I held off on making this video because I sent a message to Bex asking if I could get a sort of like developer explanation as to why they've gotten the changes, and she's very kindly managed to get me a response. So first, let's break down what's changed, and then we'll talk about why the developers made that change. Okay, so Pierce has fundamentally been reworked, both on the skill gem itself, the implicit on quivers, and on the skill tree. As far as I'm aware, the only forms of Pierce which work in the same way, where it's like you have a chance to pierce, and once you have a 100% chance to pierce, you just pierce everything, is quality on Lightning Strike, which goes up to 40%, I believe, and Poacher's Mark, which is 50%. So, as far as I'm aware, if you want to have that 100% pierce playstyle still, the only way you can do it is by being a Lightning Strike build with a 20% quality Lightning Strike and using Projectile Weakness, and that would only get you 90% chance to pierce, but it would be unlimited pierces. The new Pierce gem itself reads as projectiles from spotted skills pierce up to X additional targets. It starts with 2 and it goes up to 7, and this is also a skill gem you can now equip at level 1, and it goes from having 0 to 19% more projectile damage. So if you aren't aware, they've reworked the skill tree system, the skill system, so that there are some base support skills you can use from level 1, and Pierce is one of those now. So basically, the way that Pierce now works is you'll pierce a number of targets. The quivers, which used to have 10% chance pierce, now have 1 additional pierce. The Pierce gem has up to 7, and on the skill tree, you can also get a few sources of pierce. There is this cluster here, which gives the proj damage, then 2 additional pierce here, and 1 additional pierce here. I don't believe you can get it anywhere else. No. So, in theory, if you're doing the average bow build and you wanted to maintain the 100% pierce kind of playstyle, you would get 1 from using, for example, a drill neck quiver implicit would give you 1. You'd then get 2, you'd then get 4, and then you would get 7 from the skill gem, which would put you up to 11. And then there are some skills which have pierce in there, which currently aren't working. So, for example, Shrapnel Shot has also been changed. Shrapnel Shot no longer has the 100% pierce. It has pierce X amount of targets. Currently, it is bugged and or broken. Currently, if you start out with Shrapnel Shot at level 1, it just doesn't pierce at all. So GGG, if you could look into that, either clean up the wording on the skill gem if it's not meant to pierce anymore, or if it is meant to pierce, just make sure that it is actually piercing. So, yes. Now, I'm going to talk about the email I got back from Bex explaining why they've made this change, and then I'm going to talk about if I think this is a good, a bad change, and the possibility in sudden builds. So, I'll first go for the email I sent, like very brief TLDR of that, and then the reply, just so it has some kind of like context, right? So ignoring the base introductions of the email, I said, I was wondering if it would be possible for a brief TLDR on the thought process behind these changes. And then in particular, why Pierce is keeping the more multiplier, while Chain and Fork are still less multipliers. Should we expect more changes to come later down the line? I ask it's hard to tell if these changes were attempting to better equalize the disparity between Pierce, Chain and Fork, or simply just knock Pierce down a peg or two while improving its leveling capabilities. Because obviously Pierce is much nicer to level with now, because right off the bat you just have up to a certain number of pierces, whereas before you didn't get pierce until at least 30 odd, and then it would only be 50% unless you also had the stuff on the skill tree. So this is what Bex managed to get me back. I was able to get a brief answer from one of our developers. Here we go. We determined that pierce was an issue because of how easily players could accidentally clear monsters far off on the screen, and accidentally is in little hyphens. So I guess what they mean by that is recently, if we think about all the random like porcupine invasion reflection shenanigans, by the fact they've used the word accidentally, I interpret that to mean as like killing stuff you don't necessarily want to kill off screen. But yes, so we determined that pierce was an issue because of how easily players could accidentally clear monsters far off the screen. The change to additional pierces was the most straightforward method to bring combat much closer to the player. So they want the combat to be happening on the screen. They want it to be happening close to you. And rather than nerfing like projectile travel distance or projectile travel speed, they decided Pierce is the main culprit of this. Let's sort of rein that in. It is a fairly significant change, so we'll definitely be adjusting the number of pierces based on feedback and our own testing. A character will still be able to take off-screen enemies through other packs with heavy investment in pierce, but now be a choice rather than a natural benefit of just taking 100% total pierce. Additional pierces are still less efficient than additional chains, so it will always have a lower damage penalty, but the current 0 to 9% could easily change once we're able to spend more time reviewing this, okay? So that first half is kind of explaining why they changed the pierce, and then the second part is referring to why I asked, why is pierce keeping the more multiplier but chain and fork haven't got it? So their viewpoint is that additional chains is more powerful than additional pierce, and because of that, chain has to have a downside. From their point of view, chain is such a powerful mechanic that it needs to have some intrinsic downside in comparison to pierce, and I can understand that chain is definitely a very powerful mechanic because chain can increase your single target DPS in the sense that with chain, you can hit a mob, the projectile chains, it hits other mobs, comes back to the first mob. So if you don't know like the way the formula works, it goes pierce, then chain, then fork, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm very tired. So if you have 100% chance to pierce and you hit a mobs, it will pierce. Currently, if you only had, for example, one pierce, if you had, for example, if your build was one pierce, two chain, two fork, the first mob it hits, it would pierce through once. The next mob, it would then chain into two, and then it would all fork, right? And that's when you get all the cool stuff. And that's why I'm actually quite excited by these changes, because you're going to start seeing a hybrid approach when it comes to chain and pierce builds. So currently, there are actually quite a few chain builds. A lot of people have been doing chain Doomfletch, not through Deadeye, Deadeye's meh, but they go Raider and they use Doomfletch Tornado Shot because it's just insane levels of damage. They slap chain on it. When you get loads of extra projectiles on Tornado Shot, then add chain, it becomes incredibly powerful. And they often also use the Rigwald's Quill's Quiver, which gives fork. And if you don't know, Tornado Shot with a bunch of additional proj, chain and fork, you shoot once blinding on screen. Because of the amount of coverage you get, you like 360 clear everything. Whereas now what you'll be able to do is play that exact build, for example, and then nearly every single bow build, every bow crit build roots up this part of the tree. For 3 points, you get 2 DPS nodes and then you get 2 pierces. This is going to be insane for your pack clearing potential. So what you can do now is you can be playing a chain build which just has 2 pierce, or just 1 pierce maybe from a quiver implicit, and that's going to be huge for increasing your AoE coverage. The times when pierce felt vastly superior to chain was when you had like insane levels of mob density, so in like very thick breaches, or in the case of, you know, having allies cannot die auras, hello cat, or whatever like that. So when you have very tightly packed mobs and you want to target a particular mob, say hello, target a particular mob, say in the middle towards the back of the pack, with pierce it just cleans through everything cleanly. Whereas with chain would often just like hit the front line and it would struggle to punch through to the back. Whereas now what you can do is with pierce, let's say you're playing an LA pierce chain build, LA has inbuilt natural chain, so if you have 1 or 2 pierce, sorry, the cat's making a lot of noise, your LA will now naturally get into the middle of the pack, and then it will do mass chaining, and that's really huge. Like, that is really, really huge. This change in particular for LA, I think, is a very, very big improvement. Now, when it comes to spellcasters, this is where I'm a bit wary of the change. Now, considering the Pierce Gem itself gives you up to 7 pierces, it gives you the more multiplier, and now you don't need to travel anywhere on the tree. I think for most spellcasters, this is a general buff. A lot of spellcasters didn't like coming over to this part of the tree. If they were crit based already, they might be here, but they were often spending, you know, points to get down here, which they didn't really like. And most things don't need to pierce more than 7 mobs. If you do want to have that complete off-screen capabilities, you still have the Shaper's Boots, which give you pierce while phasing. Obviously, that's not going to be like a day one of league kind of option. That's like you can get, you know, let's say a week into a league, even earlier in softcore, etc. So I think it's one of those things of, it's overall, it's a pretty healthy change. Now, in the email, they don't mention fork at all. And fork really shouldn't have a damage multiplier, negative damage multiplier on the skill gem itself, in my opinion. I feel like fork could have the pierce treatment. If they think that fork is too powerful, then just make it have no multi. It's like you just have it and you just get fork. And if it was only just you get fork, trust me when I say not many people would use it in main DPS setups. It really wouldn't like see a sudden spike in power, because the way that chain works is with chain, it can bounce back into the first target. With fork, it hits the target and it just goes back. Like all it does is AoE clear, it never bounces back onto you. So it's one of those things where in my mind, in my mind and with what GGG is telling me, when Pierce is the weakest mechanic of the three, they're like, okay, give it some multiplier. Then fork is like the middle ground one, and then chain is like the OP one, because it's so efficient the way it can bounce backwards. Personally, I think that fork is weaker. Like if I was doing the hierarchy graph, I would say fork, because all fork does is give you back-end coverage, but Pierce gives you more back-end coverage. So fork should be the one with multiplier, Pierce should be no multiplier, and then chain should be a slight negative multiplier. And that's kind of how I would even out. And I feel like if maybe we could see some buffs to the fork gem, we could actually be in a very, very interesting place for projectile meta going forward. So yeah, basically Bex is amazing for giving me that little exclusive little answer back there. So thank you very much again for that, Bex. And that is the full workings of the current state of Pierce in the beta. But this is all very much work in progress. The number of projectiles, if it will keep this damage multi, if it will keep the same numbers, all very much up in the air. Finally, just one final thing that I'm just going to say in regards to my YouTube channel, since there has been some confusion recently. I purposely mark my YouTube videos in such a way so that you easily know which videos you do or don't want to watch. So, a brief example, I have kind of like troll silly videos. I mark those by putting emotes and emojis in the title. If there's an emoji in the title and you only like super serious videos, probably give that a pass. If you like the silly meme stuff, you like the dumb stuff, and you see something with emotes, that's some quality content right there. Check it out. So yeah, that's just a little thing, since we're getting a lot of new people to the channel recently, and they're like, wait, why is there silly stuff here? That's why. I enjoy the silly content. I will keep making the silly content. Just pick what you like. This is like a pick and mix selection. Not everyone likes all the sweets. Just enjoy the sweets that you do. But anyway, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.